Good morning. We want to thank you for joining us on our midweek devotion here from Unity Baptist Church in Champaign, Illinois. We've been studying the last several weeks about the fruit of the Spirit, and one of the points that we made on the initial lesson that we had was that the fruit of the Spirit is put forward to us in the singular. And by that I mean that the Bible says in Galatians chapter 5 and verse number 22 that the fruit of the Spirit is. Fruit is singular, and is singular as well. The fruit of the Spirit is, not the fruits of the Spirit are. It's the fruit of the Spirit is love. Now that's the fruit, and the rest of them are the manifestations of love. How do we treat each other? How do we relate to the Lord? How do we view ourselves? What is there within us that is going to express itself in spiritual terms in relation to God, and in human terms in relation to other people? Relationships are very important in the Scripture, and the giving of the gospel, the sharing of the gospel is a very important thing relationally. We just can't go up to someone and start, preaching the gospel to them. I mean, we can, but the most effective way is relationally. We develop a relationship with them, and we begin in that process of that relationship of sharing the gospel with them. So when we talk about the fruit of the Spirit is love, the expression of that fruit is joy and peace. And then today we're talking about long suffering. In my Bible, it is, in the translation that I use, it is called patience. So the fruit of the Spirit is patience. And this is the first of the second group of manifestations that relate to individuals, other people. Patience isn't something that a lot of people in our day have. We live in an instantaneous society. We want everything right now. We have instant coffee, instant tea. We have, instant internet service. We could just go on and on about what we want instantaneously. And we have that expectation today, more than at any other time in human history. And in the process of this instantaneous mindset, we lose the great benefit in our lives of long suffering or of endurance. And so if we get sick, we want instant cures. We want something to happen right now. We don't want to wait. We don't want to go through any processes. All we want to do is to take a pill or to take a drink or to do this or do that, do something else, and we will have an instantaneous result. And by bypassing that process, we also bypass the work of the Spirit of God in our life to bring us into conformity to Jesus Christ. Because one of the great benefits of having to endure something is the benefit of gaining a patience, an endurance that will help us in other areas of our life. The Bible talks about this a lot, because the truth of the matter is that we live in a real world. And as we live in this real world, A lot of these things that really matter in life and really matter to our conformity to Jesus Christ are not just going to slip away because we took a pill or because we took a drink or we shot up a drug or we smoked something, and so it kind of blurs everything from our mind for a period of time. But when all of that wears off, and it does, when all of that wears off, we are still left with the issues that we have to face in our life. It might be something in our family that we don't want to deal with. It might be something tragic that has taken place in our lives, maybe the death of someone that we love, and so we want to blur all of that out by doing something that's going to dull the pain. And what we find out is that when the Spirit of God takes up residence in our lives, He gives us the ability to endure. And in the process of that endurance, we are brought into greater and greater conformity to Jesus Christ. What an amazing message that is for us in this age of instant everything. You know, the person who shows forth the fruit of suffering long is that they learn how to bear injuries. And I'm telling you, just as a believer in Jesus Christ, as a member of a church, that you still have to deal with people. You still have to deal with hurt and with sorrow. You still have to deal with insult. In the best of contexts, we still have to live through these things. We cannot bypass them. We cannot pretend that they are not there, because they are there. And pretending or looking for an easy fix to avoid them or avoid dealing with them in our lives is not good. It doesn't help us advance in our Christian life. It doesn't move us toward godliness. We must endure. We must have patience. We must let God do His work in our lives. And that's what I want to talk to you about for just a few minutes today, as far as long suffering. You know what long suffering means? Long suffering means, and I'm not trying to be smart or cute or funny. Long suffering means suffering long. Suffering long. Now, if I were to take a poll this morning about how many of us want to suffer at all, much less suffering long, I'm sure I would find that 100% of us don't want to suffer at all. I don't want to suffer. I want life to go smooth. I'm all for smoothness as far as my life is concerned. I don't want to get sick, but I have been. I don't want to have issues that I have to deal with other people, but I've had them, and I will have them in the future. I don't want to have problems in my family, but those could arise at any moment. I don't want to be disappointed in people and the way they live or the way they act or the way they talk. But this is real life. And so we have to deal with life as it comes. And there are a couple of words in the Bible that talk about this. And one of them is found in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse number 11. And I'm going to turn over there here and I want to read this to you. 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse number 11. The Apostle Paul is writing to Timothy. Paul was kind of a mentor, a father to Timothy. because Timothy apparently was raised by his mother and his grandmother, and Paul came to Lystra and Derbe and began ministering to that family, and particularly to Timothy. And Timothy grew up and became one of Paul's sons in the faith. And so he was a very timid young man. We find this in the books of Timothy. He was not bold. He was a timid person. And so the Apostle Paul begins to mentor him. And he says in verse number 11 of chapter 6, he says, "But you, man of God, flee from these things." And he's talking about fornication. He's talking about false doctrine. He's talking about human greed. He said, "Flee from these things and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold on eternal life." That's the Apostle Paul advising Timothy. Many of those things that I just read are mentioned in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. But like I said before, he's talking about patience. He's talking about endurance to Timothy. And he's saying to Timothy, one of the things that you're going to need in ministry, one of the things you're going to need in life is patience. You're going to have to learn how to suffer long. And as I said before, we live in this instantaneous society. And if there has ever been a time in the history of the world when what the writer of Hebrews said in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse number 36, when he said, "You have need of patience." If there's ever been a time in the history of the world when that is so, it is certainly in the day in which we live. The patience that we need to have for Christian service, for just the living of our life in this world, if that's going to be evident in our lives, then it's going to have to be through the power of the Holy Spirit working in our lives and taking the Word of God and teaching us and instructing us and preparing us mentally and perhaps physically and emotionally and psychologically for the battle that we are in. Patience is a wonderful thing, and maybe you're sitting there listening this morning and you're saying, "Yes, I want patience." And many of us are like the man who prayed for patience and asked the Lord to give it to him right now. And that's our view of patience. Patience is not something that God just deposits in our life and all of a sudden, voila, we've got patience. There is a process that brings that nurtures that in our lives. The dictionary says that a patient person is one who is not hasty or impetuous. The person who has the fruit of long suffering in his life doesn't take matters into their own hands, but patiently waits for the Lord's will to be done. You know, I think of David. I'm preaching on David in our Sunday morning services, and we put that online, by the way, on Sunday morning at 10:15, but Central Time. But one of the things about David is that he waited anywhere from probably 15 to 20 years from the time that he knew he was going to be the king of Israel to the time that he finally ascended the throne. And he had in that time, that 15 to 20 year time period, David had on his heels all of the time during his life. He had the king, Saul, who was pursuing him and trying to kill him for 15 to 20 years. And David had an opportunity during those times to kill Saul and assume the throne, and he didn't do it. He was patient. He waited for God's timing. And in the process of that, God was training him and molding him and making him into the kind of man he needed to be to lead God's people. And we look at David and we see him in the field with Goliath and slaying the giant, and then we see him on the throne. But in those intervening years, David was learning how to be patient and how to wait for God's timing in his life. And we don't like that. We don't like that. We want immediacy. We want God to do what God said he's going to do for us right now. We could talk about Moses, who spent 40 years in the backside of the desert learning how to be the leader of God's people before God finally brought him back into Egypt to lead the people of God out. And in that 40-year period, Moses had to feel like he was worthless, that he was nothing. And yet those years where he was learning patience and learning how to deal with people in a desert situation, Moses could not have possibly known at that moment how important that 40-year period of his life was going to be to him. And I don't know where God has you right now. I don't know what it is he's doing right now in your life that is forcing you to be patient. And that's usually how patience comes into our life. We're just why are you being so patient? Well, because I have to be. There's nothing else I can do. But just remember that in those times, in those months or weeks or years, God is molding you and creating inside of you something that is going to be beneficial. He is teaching you how to be long-suffering, how to endure, so that God can do his work not only in your life, but also in the life of others. Another word that the Bible uses is for long-suffering is endurance. In chapter 4 of Ephesians and verse number 2, the Apostle Paul says, "Therefore I, the prisoner of the Lord, urge you to live worthy of the calling you have received, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love." This idea that's used here just means basically to put up with some things. Most Christians' endurance level, most of our endurance level is very low. You know what I found out in ministry as I've ministered to people, as I've lived my Christian life, is that sometimes you just have to put up with things. People are the way they are. Circumstances are the way they are. And all of my fit throwing and all of my complaints and all of the things that I might do in myself, in my mind, in my heart is not going to change it. And sometimes I just have to endure. And sometimes I have to just forgive people in love. Sometimes I have to instruct them because, as it says in 2 Timothy 2, they oppose themselves. You ever seen that in people? You look at them and they're doing something in their life or acting a certain way, and you say to yourself, maybe not these exact words, but you say to yourself, they're opposing themselves. They're their own worst enemy. And so you instruct them. You try to help them on the basis of the Word of God. And so, it's just a matter of enduring. I don't know what you're going through in your life right now, but it may be one of those periods of time that God is using to teach you long-suffering. He is teaching you patience. He is teaching you endurance. And I know from the experience of my own life that is not a pleasant phase of life to be in. We don't like it. And you look at Moses. First of all, 40 years in the court of Pharaoh, then 40 years in the backside of the desert with his father-in-law, and then 40 years leading a rebellious people in the wilderness. You look at those things, and I have no doubt that Moses looked back at his experience on the backside of the desert as one of the most profitable of his life. And it could be that God has you in that desert place, and He is teaching you to suffer long. You say, well, I'm getting tired of this. I want to do something in my life. I understand that. But God is the one who controls your life and who controls mine. And somebody might ask, as I close this out today, where in the world does patience ultimately come from? Well, James chapter 1 and verse number 3 tells us that the testing of your faith produces endurance or patience or long suffering. And then he gives us this advice, this command. In verse number 4, he says, and let endurance or patience or long suffering have its full effect. In other words, this endurance is having an effect upon your life. Don't short circuit it. Let it have its full effect. Why? So that you may be mature, so that you may be complete, so that you may lack nothing. Your life, my life, is not our own. It belongs to Him. And one of the things that He wants to produce in us is a spirit of long suffering. That for the glory of God, for the purposes of God, for the advancement of the cause of Christ, I will endure whatever it is, be it my health, be it my relationships with other people, be it a circumstance that I am in at this particular time in my life. I want to be faithful to the Lord. I want to be consistent in my faith. I want to live out the truth of God's Word so that I may be complete, I may be mature, and that I may lack nothing in my life. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you will use this message this morning, that we will understand that wherever we are in life right now, you're doing something that we may not see or understand. And I pray that you will complete that work in us for your glory and for the advancement of your kingdom. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a good day. Thank you for joining us today, and I invite you to come back and join us on Sunday morning at 10:15 on Facebook. Thank you for joining us.